Released way back in 2002 for PC and a couple of years later on PS2 and Xbox, this definitive edition of Mafia hit shelves in 2020. Is it an offer you can't refuse, or should it be buried in the woods? Let's find out, shall we? Set against the backdrop of the Great Depression and the Prohibition era, the game paints a vivid picture of a city steeped in corruption, glamour and danger. The atmosphere is thick with the tension of an underworld ruled by organised crime, where loyalty is both currency and curse. The game opens in 1938 with our protagonist Tommy Angelo meeting a detective in a diner. Tommy wants to make a deal. In exchange for protection for himself and his family, he is willing to testify against the Salieri crime family. The story then unfolds as a flashback detailing Tommy's rise and fall in the Mafia. In 1930, Tommy is an honest cab driver trying to make a living. One night he's forced to help two gangsters, Paulie Lombardo and Sam Trapani, escape from a rival gang, the Morello family. Though he initially wants nothing to do with them, Salieri's men later help him when Morello's thugs retaliate. With his cab destroyed and fearing for his life, Tommy turns to Don Ennio Salieri for protection and ends up joining the family. Tommy initially fits right in, making close friends and gaining the respect of the Don and his peers. Tommy is known as a slick operator and a reliable linchpin in the organisation. It's this reputation that catches the eye of Sarah, the daughter of Salieri's bartender. Tommy and Sarah enter into a relationship, and from this point on, things begin to change for Tommy. As he gets deeper and deeper into the mob, and the world he operates in reveals itself to be about as stable as a drunk on a unicycle, he begins to question where his loyalties should lie, with the family he fell into or the family he made. The story in Mafia is a solid one. It's filled with moral dilemmas and takes an interesting look at organised crime in 30s America. It's got a cast of characters that you can't help liking even when they do morally questionable things. It gives you a stark stare into actions and consequences and how greed and power can masquerade as respect. If, like me, you're a fan of gangster movies, it's not going to reveal itself to be the most original mob story you've ever come across, but it is a well-constructed one with decent writing and characterisation.
Look, I can't promise anything for your family, not until I hear what you're trading. So, are you talking? Or are you just killing time before they come for you?
Graphically, Mafia, the definitive edition, really shines. This remake of the 2002 crime caper is a really pretty game. The fictional city of Lost Heaven is a highly detailed, living, breathing city. Period cars trundle about in the picturesque streets while NPCs go about their daily lives. Travel out into the more rural areas of the map and the countryside is just as appealing. Some nicely rendered trees and foliage adorn the green areas, with run-down farm shacks littering the local farms. Some nice weather effects complement the scenery and add to the vintage atmosphere the game creates. Character models look great too. Our main man Tommy is well detailed, from his designer stubble down to his Italian leather shoes. He looks the part of an up-and-coming gangster, while the rest of the cast are treated to a similar quality of presentation. In cutscenes there are some solid facial animations and nice touches like the pronounced textile texture of shirts and jackets. Add to that mood-filled lighting and shadow and you're absorbed even more into 1930s America. Although the city mainly behaves itself, I did get the occasional bit of pop-in. Pedestrians, textures and some buildings did appear to have a short draw distance, which exacerbated the issue, but in the heat of a mission it wasn't too much of an issue. Animation is not as nice to look at as the graphics. It's not awful, it does the job, but sometimes Tommy and his NPC buddies can look a little awkward. Not a huge problem in the grand scheme of things, but it is a bit off-putting when it occurs. Performance was consistently good. I didn't encounter any crashes. Plenty of other bugs, but more on that later. I didn't even experience any dips in frame rate. Everything stayed calm, even in the most hectic of missions. With a stunningly realised game world and above average character models, Mafia is a gorgeous game to behold and scores 23 out of 25 for graphics.
Blow them all down, Tommy. Not one of them goes home tonight.
Mafia, the definitive edition, is an open-world action game cut from a similar cloth to the Grand Theft Auto series. Mafia manages to distance itself from the usual GTA-like games in a few ways. Some good, some not so good. First off, there is the setting. Instead of the modern world, Mafia is set in 1930s America in a fictional city called Lost Heaven. It's refreshing to be playing in a different era, and although we are playing in the typical New York that's not New York cityscape, it's nice that it has a different look and feel. Another thing that Mafia does differently to other games of this ilk is the mission structure. It's a much tighter and more focused approach. The game starts out with our main protagonist Tommy trying to make a deal with a detective, info on the Don in exchange for his family's safety. The game then plays out as Tommy's memories as he recites them to Detective Norman. I enjoyed this story-driven approach. Each mission developed the legend of Tommy, an average Joe taxi driver thrust into a world of crime and violence. You can see the change in Tommy as the game progresses. It made a pleasant change to be playing a more tightly driven narrative. Usually in these types of games I find myself going here, there and everywhere doing random stuff, and sometimes I literally lose the plot. However, as much as I enjoyed this approach, it did highlight that the game is light on anything to do outside of the story. Side content pretty much amounts to collectibles in the form of comics, postcards, cigarette cards, etc. These items offer some fleshing out of the story and game world and contribute to achievements, but nothing else. If you're looking for the stack of content games like GTA offer, you may come away from Mafia feeling a little shortchanged. Another game system conspicuous by its absence is anything resembling a progression system. There is no levelling Tommy up. However, he will acquire a few different weapons as he progresses the story, and you can collect cars as you go, which are added to the garage at the safe house for use at the start of most missions. Getting around the city of Lost Heaven is done on foot or by the ample supply of cars, trucks and motorcycles that you can borrow from their unsuspecting owners. The vintage cars in Mafia handle like you would expect an underpowered 3-ton steel behemoth to handle. The wheels and tyres, which wouldn't look out of place on a mountain bike, grip the road like a blob of Vaseline on an ice rink, while braking is handled by praying and hoping. The devs have definitely gone for some period realism on the driving front, and the game is all the better for it. Learning how to drive these archaic machines is almost a game in itself, and once you get used to it, it becomes really satisfying. As well as driving to and from missions, the other thing you'll be doing a lot of is fighting, mainly with guns but sometimes with fists or bats. Gunplay is fairly simplistic. Get behind something solid using the game's simple cover mechanics, then pop out and blast the bad guys while avoiding a hail of hot lead. It's not earth-shattering stuff, but it is fun enough to keep you entertained until the end of the game. Hand-to-hand combat is also fairly basic. You get the opportunity to dodge incoming blows and land your own, and when enough damage has been done, a finisher is performed, although you will see the same one or two regularly. Again, nothing special here, but just about enough fun. It's also possible to use stealth to dispatch your enemies. Again, it's a basic affair of going into sneak mode, then getting behind your target and choking them out. Enemy AI when using stealth is pretty limited. Your quarry will walk in predictable patterns, pretty much begging to be rendered unconscious. Felled enemies will be ignored by their buddies. They only really react if you're caught red-handed. So, with challenging but fun driving mechanics and fun enough armed and unarmed combat, everything is okay then. Well, not exactly. Mafia does have a few problems. First off, bugs. The game is riddled with them. I had very few missions where the game triggered events as it should, resulting in having to restart at a checkpoint. It's not quite as annoying as having to reload the entire game after a crash, but it's immersion breaking and annoying nonetheless. It's also worth mentioning that I had a hell of a time getting the game to even run in the first place. Apparently a game made in 2020 doesn't like full screen mode. After a lot of googling and trips to the Steam forum, I got it up and running, but it wasn't ideal. If you're interested in the fix I used, then check out the description box for details. The other issue with Mafia that I encountered was enemy AI. It can be ridiculously dumb at times. On occasion I would run around a corner and come face to face with an enemy, only to have them turn their back and await execution, or an enemy would break cover and walk towards me while reloading their gun. On the whole, it wasn't a massive issue. Most of the enemies will take cover and act like they value their life, but when they don't, it does pull you out the moment somewhat. Mafia Definitive Edition has a well realised game world, backed up by a competently written and paced story and populated with solid characters. Its combat is rudimentary but good enough to keep you engaged, and the game's driving mechanics with a focus on realism are good fun. The annoying level of bugs, some dodgy enemy AI, and the lack of things to do when not in a mission pull down the score somewhat. Mafia gets 19 out of 25 for gameplay.
So, I mean, I got a cousin again.
The soundtrack in Mafia is excellent. A plethora of moody orchestral tunes accompany you on your missions as you navigate life in the mob. You get a bit of everything in Mafia. Menacing Godfather-esque tunes, some upbeat jazz, melancholic soul. Add to that the in-car radio with its period news and tunes, and it all adds to the game's great atmosphere. Even the more minor incidental music is well done. You're never short of something quality to listen to. Sound effects are also solid. The game's hefty cars sound as feral as they handle, their doors clunking shut with a satisfying thump, and the streets of Lost Heaven sound alive and bustling. In a game like Mafia, where the story really drives the game, it's important that the voice acting is up to scratch, and I'm happy to say it is. The main cast of characters are all great. Tommy starts out as the humble taxi driver, gradually turning into a cool and confident wise guy. His main buddy, Paulie, comes across as the loyal but slightly psychotic made man, hiding disillusion and depression behind a front of bravado. The father figure of Don Salieri's mask slips now and then, revealing a bitter, resentful man full of spite. The entire cast are all played really well by their respective voice actors. Even more minor characters are engaging. With its excellent score and well-acted voice performances, Mafia Definitive Edition scores 23 out of 25 for audio.
Welcome to the family. Excellent. Now I'm starving. Luigi, let's eat.
Mafia is not a long game, coming in at around 12 hours to complete the story, and maybe topping 20 if you go for all the collectibles. There are a few different difficulty levels, with Classic mode being the most challenging. Classic aims to up the realism stakes with a number of alterations over the other difficulty levels. The police will now pull you over for breaking speed limits. You can't go waving a gun about in public or the law will descend on you. Gone are the signpost GPS signals from the easier difficulties. Cars are less durable, remaining ammo is lost if you reload with some bullets still in the gun. The list of ways the game throws challenge at you is pretty comprehensive in Classic mode. There are also a number of settings you can tweak to make life easier or harder for yourself. For instance, you can play with manual transmission in cars. There are lots of options to tailor the challenge in Mafia. To complement the more targeted story mode, you also have Free Ride, where you can just exist in Lost Heaven without the pressures of mob life bearing down on you. It's a nice way of taking in the sights, but there isn't a whole heap to do beyond enjoying the scenery. You can go around and find collectibles, steal cars or aggravate the police, but that's about all. It's a bit of a missed opportunity. It would have been an ideal chance to include some side missions with some juicier weapons or cars as rewards. As it stands, it's just an easier way to take in the nice graphical upgrades the game has made over the original. Mafia is a fat-free experience. It's been trimmed to be a lean, mean gangster gaming machine. If you have a busy life and the thought of 100+ hour games brings you out in a cold sweat, then Mafia may well be for you. But if you like to take your time and immerse yourself in a game and all it has to throw at you, you may find yourself still hungry after the small portion that Mafia serves. Value scores 18 out of 25.
Driver,
Yes, ma'am.
are you driving or loitering?
Driving, ma'am. Always driving.
Mafia Definitive Edition is a game defined by what it doesn't include almost as much as what it does. It's a short experience which can feel a little empty at times. The city of Lost Heaven is gorgeous but underutilised. There is no side content to speak of, no upgrades, no special weapons, no progression system, and a few too many bugs. However, what is here is of a decent quality. The story, although not hugely original, is well written. The cast of characters is acted well by their voice artists. The driving mechanics have been handled well, and combat is just the right side of fun. Mafia is a compact game with undeniable charm. It manages to capture the essence of the old black and white gangster movies while incorporating the menace of more modern day crime capers. It's a different take on the tried and tested GTA formula and scores 82 out of 100.
Christ, Tom. You can't feel sorry for these animals. A guy like this would plug you if you give him the chance. You gotta pull the trigger without thinking.